The portion of Vayeira speaks about God revealing himself to Abraham. After the third day of the circumcision, God appears to Abraham. And furthermore, it talks about the birth of Isaac, the birth of Yitzchak. And then finally, the portion concludes with the story of the Akedah, the binding of Yitzchak, how God tells Abraham to take his only child, his son Yitzchak that he loved so much and that is so dear, and give him up on the altar for an offering. And what is the amount of pasukim in this week's Parsha? How many passages do we have? Our rabbis tell us that we have 147 pasukim, kuf mem zayin pasukim. And what is the mnemonic to remember that there's 147 pasukim or passages in this week's Parsha? Our rabbis tell us that is the word amno. That amno is a reminder for the Masoretic note to how many verses there are in the portion of Vayeira. So first and foremost, what is the number 147? The number 147 represents the life of Yaakov Avinu, represents the years of Jacob, our forefather. And so the question immediately comes to mind. We're talking about the birth of Isaac, and we're talking about God revealing himself to Abraham. Why is the Torah bringing in the story of Yaakov, Jacob, who lived 147 years? Furthermore, who is Amno? Amno was the son of King David, who forced an illicit relation upon his sister Tamar. And 2 years later, his brother Avshalom killed him because of this act. What is the connection between Amno and the portion of Vayeira? So to answer these questions, we find a very powerful medrash. A medrash rabbah, which is found in the book of Leviticus. And there it says like this, in chapter number 36, Ois Dalid, it says, in the name of Rabbi Shmuel ben Nachman, Abraham, our forefather, was only saved from the fiery inferno when he was thrown into the oven by Nimrod, only in the merit of Jacob. And he goes on to say there's a parable of a person who was supposed to be killed by the king. He was supposed to be burned alive. However, the king's astrologers saw that this person would give birth to a girl, a daughter, and this daughter would eventually marry the king. So because the king was going to marry the daughter of this person who committed treason, the king does not kill him. Says the Medrash that Avraham Avinu really should have been burned. What saved Avraham Avinu? The fact that he would give birth eventually to Yaakov. And that is the meaning in the book of Isaiah, chapter 29. Yaakov asher pada es Avraham. That was Jacob that saved Abraham. He saved Abraham from the fiery inferno. And then the Medrash goes on to say, V'Rabbanan, and the rabbis say, that Abraham himself would never have been born, only in the merit of Jacob. And this is hinted in this week's Parsha, in the Parsha of Vayeira, chapter 18, verse number 13. It says over there, God tells Abraham, I love you, Abraham. Ki yadaitiv. Why do I love you? Because you have commanded your children and your household to go in the way of God, la'aseh tzedakah umishpat. To do charity and justice. And the Medrash goes on to say that where do we find the charity and justice? We find this by Yaakov Avinu, by Jacob, our forefather. It says in the book of Psalms by King David, Mishpat utzedakah b'Yaakov atov sisa. That Jacob is the one that represents charity, good deeds, and the study of Torah. So what do we see from this Medrash? We see from this Medrash that even though the Torah speaks about Abraham, and the Torah speaks about Isaac in this week's Torah portion, however, they are only an introduction to the ultimate chosen one of the fathers, the Bechir Sheba'avos, and that is Jacob. And to expound upon 2 points. Number one is that we find in Hayoim Yoim, a book written by the Rebbe based on the teachings of the Frierdiker Rebbe. So an entry for the 8th of Tammuz. The Rebbe says an amazing thing. The Rebbe says that Ikar Chibase Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'Avram, the main love that God had for Abraham was because of the fact that he commanded and he connected his children with God. And therefore, because he connected his children to follow in the ways of God, therefore God loved them. And therefore, the nisyonot, the 10 tests that Abraham was given, including the one in this week's Parsha, to put Isaac on the altar, is totally incomparable. Incomparable to the greatness of a father and a mother that teach their children to go in the ways of God. And this is a tremendous paradigm shift. Because on one hand, you see over here that Avram was tested, and as the Talmud says, if he would not have passed this test, the Satan would have told God, you should know all the other tests are worthless. And yet, we find that the true love that God had for Abraham was not because he was able to overcome all of these tests. The true love that God had for Abraham was the fact that he followed the laws of Torah and mitzvos. And it's interesting to note that after Abraham overcame this test, when he was willing to sacrifice Isaac, what does the Torah say? Now I know that you're God-fearing, that you fear God. It doesn't say, now I know you love God. If you love God, then you're willing to connect your children to God. That is love. Fear is not to violate, but love is to connect another Jew, another person, and to bring that person closer to God. And that was Yaakov Avinu. He was the grandchild of Avraham. Furthermore, we find that the Rashi, in the end of this week's Torah portion, also hints to this concept. Rashi tells us, why is it that after the story of the Akedah, of the binding of Isaac, we find that the Torah tells us that Rivka was born. Why is it so important to talk about the birth of Rivka after the crescendo that Isaac was about to be slaughtered and God saved him and said, don't do it? That should be the end of the Parsha. Yet, the Parsha ends with another small paragraph. By the way, Rivka was born. Says Rashi, that Avraham Avinu said, you know, I almost lost my son Isaac. And if Isaac would have been slaughtered on the altar, I would have no grandchildren. The Jewish people would not be able to continue. So therefore, let's marry him off and have a child. Who is that child that came about from the holy matrimony of Yitzchak to Rivka? That child, of course, was Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, our forefather. So here, at the end of the Parsha, our rabbis tell us, you should know, there's 147 verses, the life of Yaakov Avinu, for he is truly the chosen of all the fathers. Why? For Yaakov Avinu was the one that dedicated his life to study the Torah, in contrast to Avraham, who represented charity and kindness, in contrast to Yitzchak, that represented the concept of prayer. Yaakov represents the concept of Torah study. And it was Yaakov's children that received the Torah on Sinai. And they received the laws, which are equivalent to tzedakah, for tzedakah is a practical mitzvah. The practical mitzvos were given on Sinai to the children of Jacob. And that is why we find in the code of Jewish law that when a child is able to speak, what is the first thing you teach him? You don't teach him his social security number. You don't teach him his phone number. You don't teach him his home address. The first thing you teach a child, when a child is able to talk, is what? Torah tziva lanu Moshe. The Torah that Moses commanded us, Moirasha kihilas Yaakov, was an inheritance to the children of Jacob. So we see Jacob represents the Torah. How does all of this connect with Amnon? So the answer is that perhaps the rabbis are telling us a very interesting thing. The Torah is so powerful that it has the ability to protect a person. Because the commentaries ask, how is it that Amnon was able to survive 2 years after he committed this terrible atrocity with Tamar? How come Avshalom, Tamar's brother, did not kill Amnon immediately? And the Medrash says the reason is because Amnon was studying Torah. When a person studies Torah, you prolong your life, and Torah has the ability to save a person from death. So here too, Amnon underscores the quality of Yaakov, that was Torah. As we know, Titin Emes Yaakov, the quality of truth was given to Jacob, and Torah is called Toras Emes, the Torah of truth. And here we see, through the story of Amnon, how through the study of Torah, one's life is truly prolonged. But perhaps we can give another description and another insight to why Yaakov is hinted here in our Torah portion. And this is based on the Gemara in Psachim. The Gemara in Psachim on page 88, side A, says the following. It quotes a verse from Micha. Why does it say in Micha? It says over there that when Mashiach will come, all the nations of the world will go up to the mountain of God, and then it goes on to say, El Beis Elikei Yaakov, to the house of the God of Jacob, implying that they will all go and serve God in the Holy Temple. That the Holy Temple, the third Beis HaMikdash, will not only be for the Jewish people, but rather all the nations of the world are going to acknowledge the greatness of God, and they too will come to the house of Jacob. So the Gemara here in Psachim, page 88, side A, goes on to say, you should know, why is it that the verse states the house of Jacob, not Abraham or Isaac? So the Talmud goes on to say, you should know that God, the Holy Temple, is not called a mountain, like Abraham called it a mountain. In other words, even though we know in this week's Torah portion that Isaac was put on Har HaMoriah, Mount Moriah, and that was the mountain in which the Holy Temple was built upon, yet it's not called the Temple of Abraham, it's not even called the Temple of Isaac. Why? Says the Gemara, because Avram called this mountain Har Hashem, the mountain of God. Yitzchak called this mountain a field. But Yaakov called this mountain God's home, Kel Beis Kel, the house of God. Because he called it a house, therefore it will be called on the name of Jacob. The Masha on the Gemara says, why is it that Abraham called it a mountain, and Isaac called it a field, and only Jacob was the one that called it a home. So the Parsha brings a parable of a king that had 3 friends. And he told his 3 friends, you know, I am going to build for myself a palace. And the first friend said, over there, you're building a palace? I remember when it used to be a mountain. The second friend said, yeah, that place, I remember when it used to be a field. And the third guy said, yeah, that place that you want to build your palace, I always envisioned the palace there. And the king said, you know what? I'm going to call my palace after you. Because you always saw the dream, you always saw the palace. And the Parsha says that Avraham Avinu is referring to the first holy temple. The first holy temple was like a mountain, because on a mountain there's only temporary supervision. And so too the first temple was only supervised for 410 years. Jacob called it a field. He was referring to the second holy temple. A field is less supervised than a mountain, and in the second temple they were missing certain holy objects that was found in the first temple but not in the second temple. Jacob, the third, was referring to the third holy temple. That would truly be God's home. And a home is something which is eternal. A home is a place which is kevah. It is a permanent dwelling. And that is the third holy temple that will be for all time. And so therefore at the end of the Parsha that talks about Abraham taking Isaac onto this mountain of God, our rabbis tell us, yes, it was the mountain of God, but it was only temporary. What made this mountain of God permanent? This was Jacob, by calling this mountain the house of Almighty God. It's interesting to note that Yaakov Avinu lived 147 years. Why 147? So the Rebbe explains in the talk that 147 alludes to the perfection of Yaakov Avinu. He was perfect in his will, he was perfect in his intellect, and he was perfect in his emotions. How do we see that? Kuf, which is 100, alludes to Keser, alludes to the level of crown. Crown represents a person's desire and a person's pleasure. His desire and his pleasure was perfect. Keser starts with the letter Chaf. 10 times 10. Chaf is 20. 10 times 10 is 100. This alludes to the realm of Keser, the realm of crown, one's will and desire that is perfect. 40 alludes to intellect, because we know there are 3 basic levels of intellect. Chokhmah, the concept, Bina, understanding, and then Das, which is knowledge. But knowledge is also split into 2, which is kindness and severity. We see this in the tefillin. The box of the tefillin that goes upon one's head has actually 4 boxes in it. And it's called Dalit Moichin, the 4 levels of the brain. So 4 times 10. 10 represents something which is complete. Each level of the brain by Yaakov was complete, and therefore it's 40. And then you have 7. 7 alludes to the 7 emotions. Now, these 7 emotions were also complete, that he loved God, and he feared God, and he beautified God, etc., etc. And this also is a hint to the redemption, because the Rambam says when Mashiach will come, the Jewish people will become Chachamim Gedolim, great wise people, and the Sigu Das Boidam, they will understand the knowledge of the Creator. So the Sigu is understanding, and Das is knowledge. So here we find again these 3 aspects of Chokhmah, Bina, Das, which is the concept, understanding, and knowledge. So this is the idea of 147. And when we're talking about letters and numbers, we could also apply this to the name of Amnon. How do we connect this with Amnon? As we said earlier, that Amnon was saved because of Torah. How do we see Torah in the name of Amnon? So Amnon is Aleph, Mem, Nun. Nun Vav Nun is Nun. Aleph represents God, Aluf Shalom. And we know the Torah was given 2,000 years before creation. So the Aleph is Alpayim Shana, 2,000 years the Torah preceded the world. Then you have the Mem. Mem is 40. Mem also stands for Moshe. Moshe gave us the Torah. But Mem has the gematria of 40. He was on the Mount Sinai 40 days and 40 nights. And then Nun equals 50. The Jewish people counted 50 days, Sfirat Omer, from when they left Egypt until they received the Torah on Sinai. So you have Aleph, Mem, Nun. Aleph is 2,000 years before creation. Mem are the 40 days of Sinai that Moses studied the Torah with God. And Nun are the 50 gates of understanding and the 50 days that the Jews counted to receive the Torah. How do we connect all of this with the year of Hakel? We find ourselves in the year of Hakel. When the king would gather all the Jewish people together, men, women, and children, and teach them the Torah. Who was the one that gathered all the people together? That was the king Melech. And the greatest king of Israel is considered to be David Melech Israel, King David. To the degree that we say that Mashiach is called by the name of David. David Malka Mashiach. David the king, the Mashiach. Now, King David wrote the Tehillim. How many chapters are there in Tehillim? So what we have today, the printed version is 150. But truthfully, the Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud says that there's only 147 chapters in the Tehillim. And that King David wrote it in the merit of Jacob. So the fact that we have 150 is because earlier 2 paragraphs or 2 chapters were one, or 1 chapter was subsumed in another one. But basically there was only 147 chapters according to the Jerusalem Talmud, again in the name of Jacob. So this is the concept of Hakel. So how do we understand the Parsha? How do we bring everything together? What is the message of the Torah portion of Vayeira according to the mnemonics? It's very, very simple. Many times we think that the way to serve God is by becoming a martyr. We think that the only way we're going to acquire great spiritual heights is by dying for God. Comes along the portion of Vayeira and says no. That the way to reach true spiritual heights and the way to truly be beloved by God is not to die for God, but rather to live for God. And to live for God means to study Torah and to perform mitzvos, and not only to be selfish about it, say, well, I'm a good person, I pray every day, I daven, I study Torah, I give charity, I do the mitzvos. That's very, very nice. If you want to be beloved, you must be like Avraham. You have to pass it on to your children, pass it on to your friends. As the Rambam says, what does it mean to love God? Be like Abraham that went around and he inspired the entire world to call by the name of God. So this is the message of the Parsha. It's not about dying for God, it's about living for God. And by doing so, you are truly loved by God. And this is done by commanding and connecting your friends and your children to Almighty God, which is really the message of Hakel. That the king reads the Torah. Why? So that all those that are there are inspired to follow in the ways of God and to study God's Torah. So we hope and pray that very soon to see the ultimate Hakel. Once again we will see the rebuilding of the 3rd Holy Temple. And this 3rd temple will be in the name of Jacob, as we explained. And here in the 3rd Holy Temple, the Melech HaMashiach himself will read from the Torah. And then we'll see the ultimate Hakel, the ultimate ingathering of all Anoshim, of all the men, and all the women, and all the children. Now, as we say, that not even one Jew will be left behind. And then all the nations of the world will flock to the Holy Temple, to the house of the God of Jacob, with the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days.